Welcome to the Butt Fixer Podcast, brought to you by Shane Gentry and John Van Olden. Sit back, listen up, and listen good. You're going to hear it all right because we've already done it all wrong. We're going to help you meet your goals and fix your butts. Welcome to the Butt Fixer Podcast.
All right. Okay, so here we are. This is Jeffrey Shaw. Jeffrey Shaw is an author. He's a photographer. That's your that was your main gig, right, Jeff?
It was indeed.
Do I say
40
Jeffrey,
years.
right? Jeffrey, not Jeff. Is that right?
I actually don't care, but for SEO purposes, you'll find me as Jeffrey Shaw.
I got you.
Gotcha.
I
I
got
don't
you.
care.
My son is Jeffrey, and I still call him Jeffrey. Everybody else calls him Jeff, so it's how it goes. So, he's Jeffrey with the G. So a lot of people call him Goffrey.
I don't have that. People get the J, but everybody
Gone phonics worked for me.
Yeah. So yeah, you've got you kind of started your professional life started as a professional door-to-door organic farm to table egg salesman, right? Selling eggs.
That was the beginning of it all. 14 years old. Two things occurred to me. One is, maybe three things. One is I wanted to make some money for myself. Secondly, it was actually the impetus for me to decide to spend the rest of my life being self-employed. I've never had a traditional job. I've never received a paycheck from anybody. Because at 14 years old, I just looked at my situation growing up in a small country town. My parents weren't going to pay for an education. I was at that point in my life, so incredibly shy. I'm thinking, who would hire this geek? Like, nobody would hire me. So I just figured if I didn't take the bull by the horns, nobody else was going to. So that's why I decided to become self-employed. And then, as a shy kid, knocking on people's doors and selling them eggs was about the scariest thing I could have done. But that's when I learned the greatest lesson of business ownership is that you are called to the mat every day of your life. You have to find a bigger, bolder version of yourself. And I found that we'll do anything in life if the benefit is greater than the fear. And
that's true.
I was scared crapless selling those eggs door to door, knocking on doors. But I'll tell you what, and it wasn't the money that was bigger than that. What was bigger than that was watching myself grow.
Yeah.
It became my entire source of personal development because I wasn't getting it at home. Like nobody in my family was going to, help me develop as a person. I used to buy Wayne Dwyer self-help books when I was a little kid with my allowance, and I'd hide them in my house because I wanted to grow as a person, but that was not cool back in the day, right?
Right.
So, for me, business ownership has been personal development on steroids, and that's why I'm in it. That's the biggest reason for me.
How'd you come up with were eggs just that alone?
Yeah, he just took my question.
I grew up in the country. I grew up about an hour and a half north of New York City, which back in the day, an hour and a half, 2 hours north of New York City was farmland. And here's the crazy thing. I think you guys will appreciate this. So my family was moved there. My father's entire family had always been in the construction business. They were moved to this little town called Hopewell Junction.
Okay.
Or as I like to say, you can tell everything about my childhood by the name. Like that's where I grew up. I grew up in a place called Hopewell Junction. But we were moved there because there was a startup computer company starting, and they were going to build their production plant there. And that little startup company became known as IBM.
Oh, wow.
My father was one of the first 90 employees in the production plant of IBM.
No, my dad retired from there, and my grandfather did.
Right? It was back in the day. Big Blue was massive, and this was East Fishkill. This is what they were going to name the plant. And, again, he was one of the first. So IBM bought up all the farmland, and I had this weird upbringing because it was basically farmland. That's where I got the idea to sell eggs. I would go to a farm. They would provide the cardboard cartons. I'd sit there and stuff the cartons and then go door to door and sell eggs. My mother owned a beauty parlor in town, like straight out of Steel Magnolias movie, and little old ladies. And so they would buy eggs. But here's the crazy thing. At the same time, my father was working for the latest technology company in the world, telling me, like, in the 70s, how someday we would live in a cashless society, how someday everything would have a barcode on it. Someday, I learned DOS at like 8 years old. Like I knew how to program computers. It was the weirdest Meanwhile, we shared a phone number with 5 other families called the party line because there weren't enough phone lines.
Oh, wow.
That's what my childhood looked like. It was the weirdest, like high technology of the future and farmlands and party line telephones. It was just the weirdest upbringing. But to
That's
me,
wild.
the only thing we had a lot of in the area, there wasn't a lot of education. There weren't a lot of smarts. There wasn't a lot of money. The only thing we had a lot of was eggs. So I figured I can sell that.
That's wild, man. Just eggs. That's crazy. That's a wild, so Shane, Shane's dad retired from IBM and his mom was a hairdresser.
Yeah, my mom was a hairdresser.
the
Twinsies.
So there you go. Yeah.
Hey, and do you walk through the grocery store down the egg aisle and go, I could get rid of this whole shelf today.
No, I tell you, every time, well, first of all, I think I can sell anything.
Yeah.
Now actually, it's funny you should say that because I sold eggs for $1.25 back in like 1978 when I was 14.
Oh, wow.
And I went back and did some research so we'll see how correct Google is on this, but the average price of a dozen of eggs in 1978 was 78 cents, and I was selling them for $1.25. So when I see eggs, I'm like, man, I had this down right from the beginning that we can charge whatever we want for anything in life. You just have to figure out how to help your clients justify it.
Yeah.
And it was for me, it wasn't that it was home delivery, because a lot of people think, oh, well, of course you can charge more home delivery service, right? I tell you, service is not a differentiator because anybody can come along and match that service. So service in and of itself is not a differentiator. The differentiator was that they were farm fresh. I can't promise they were organic, but they were farm fresh, right?
Right.
So, and by and large, this area that I lived in, because IBM had become so dominant, everyone there was a transplant from somewhere else. And a lot of them, New York City people, Westchester County, which is where my family was moved from. So you had a lot of people that grew up in more city environments, now living in the middle of godforsaken nowhere, but they were there for the job. So farm fresh eggs had a real cachet to them. Which is why I tell this really cool story in my book about chicken poop.
Yes.
And it has,
I was going to bring that up.
Right.
Yeah.
And it has everything to do with marketing, because one day, like I said, I would go on Thursdays and I'd fill up these cartons of eggs. And I used to meticulously clean off all the chicken poop because that seemed gross. If you're going to sell eggs door to door, make sure they're nice and clean. And farm fresh eggs are already very colorful, right? They're not bleached white. So they're all different colors, but you clean off the chicken poop. One day I had this idea. I wanted to test a theory. Now, mind you, I'm 14 years old. And I thought to myself, what if I left a little chicken poop on the eggs? just the right amount. And I had a theory, and the theory has become the basis of everything I teach and coach on today, which is that what you want to do in marketing, and everybody needs to hear this and let's take this in. What you want to do in marketing is help your customers feel the emotions they want to feel anyway. Okay, so you're not maybe manipulative, making them. Too many people in sales try to make people feel things that they want the customers to feel. The power is in helping your customers feel what you know they want to feel. So you have to know your customers really well.
Right.
And then you have to figure out, what do I need to say and do in order to make them feel the emotions that you know they want to feel. And what I knew is that my customers wanted to feel like they had authentic farm fresh eggs. So when I left a little bit of the chicken poop on there, every customer had the exact same reaction. Every one of them. They opened up the carton of eggs, they winced a little bit, and then they said, well, I guess they're farm fresh.
Farm fresh, yeah.
And I realized that, and to this day, that's exactly how I coach, that's how I teach, that's how I help people do the brand messaging on their website, where we take control. What do we want people to feel that we know your ideal customers want to feel as they scroll through your website, section by section? We want them to feel this here. We want them to feel this. This, by the way, is all the basis of my book, Lingo, which is a brand messaging book. So that I learned all my lessons in business at 14 years old selling eggs.
Wow. Please tell me that you named that the chicken poop theory or something like that.
I had, and funny thing,
the poop coop.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is, so as a speaker, I primarily speak to luxury businesses. So I've brought my 40 years of serving ultra wealthy clients. I've brought everything I unpacked in that 40-year experience about all the emotional triggers and the luxury market, because here's the thing. What makes the luxury market super unique is that money is not an issue. And when money isn't an issue, everything else is. So everything, when you're satisfying or serving a luxury market or a luxury clientele, everything is blown up way out of proportion. Like they need to feel emotions even stronger because money isn't an issue. They can afford anything they want. So how do you stand out? You have to make them feel what they want to feel even bigger than anybody else. Customer service, like basic, even great customer service isn't great enough because they've gotten it all. They've seen all the best of the best. So how do you give better service than great service? Right. So everything in the luxury business is blown up out of proportion. So imagine if you take those concepts and principles and you apply them even in non-luxury businesses. Okay. That's the key. So my point of all this is that, so this is what I speak on from stages, and I speak at all sorts of associations and events with luxury goods and services. And I tell that chicken poop story. Okay. And about and about 3/4 way through the story, I pause and I'm like, okay, I know this is a story about chicken poop, but trust me, it has everything to do with luxury marketing in a moment. Right. Because it does. It's like at the end of the day, even more so for the luxury market, because how do you make people feel what you know they want to feel? Like I said, first of all, you have to know your ideal client so incredibly well, not their data, not their demographics, but their hearts and their emotions. You need to know them so that you can speak their lingo, hence the name of my book.
Right. So how did you get, so what did you do so then you did the eggs all the way through like high school, didn't you?
I did. And I actually sold that business. I mean, I flipped it.
Wow. Really?
Yeah. I don't remember. It wasn't for much, but I did sell it.
That is funny. Yeah. And I don't know if you listened to like my first podcast, the one we started with, I started out, my buddy and I, 12 years old, put an ad in the newspaper and washed cars in the summertime. Yep. And we did it all the way through high school. And when I left and went into the Army, my friend got a real job. And his little brother took over that business, and he did it until he was about 30 years old, turned it into a detailing business, and he flipped it. Same business. That's really cool. A lot of the same customers that we had from 12, 13 years old. So you'd be surprised. You got into photography, right? You were like a photographer in high school. Like that was your jam in school, right?
Yeah, it was my ticket out. It was honestly the only thing. I didn't know what to do with it, but I had a talent. But back, in high school, I was photographing really abstract, fine art type of photography, but winning national awards. So I had an eye, I had a talent. I just didn't know what I wanted to do with it. So I went off to photography school, really intending on being an architect photographer because I loved architecture. Okay. And I didn't like people much. So I figured, or I was afraid of people, I should say. So I figured photographing buildings would be right up my alley. But along the way, I started photographing people in the architectural environments, and I fell in love with photographing people, but I really liked the environment. So that's why I made a decision early on that as a photographer, I would photograph entirely on location. Like I never photographed in a studio. I was not your typical photographer. Mm-hmm. Okay. But that's also what leveraged my ability to photograph the ultra affluent families I did, because they have homes all over the world. And what I was particularly good at was you could drop me any place in the world and I can make a beautiful family portrait. So that gave me a lot of flexibility. And again, it was a lifestyle. And back in the 80s, that was unusual for photography, that people would, photographers would go to people's homes and travel and et cetera. So, but I kind of combined my loves of architecture with ultimately what I had as a talent, and had to figure out how to serve the ultra affluent, and there you go. It took off.
And you went from one to the other, from the eggs to you sold photography. Or did you have something in between?
I sold greeting cards somewhere in between that mix. But yeah, that's it. I mean, it's that's the extent of my resume, man.
And you did it. You did it also.
That's embarrassing.
All self-employed, all working for yourself, though. That's the thing, man. Yeah,
that's it. Yeah, never. When in my darkest, times when any of us are facing challenging times, the thing that I always remind myself is every dollar that ever slipped through my fingers, I made.
Yeah,
right.
That's something.
That's really awesome.
Yeah, and didn't just earn like you would at
Yeah.
a traditional job, but actually made, right? I mean, that's what we do as entrepreneurs. We make something from nothing.
Yeah, selling air.
I'm kind of curious too
about.
with the when you're talking about really tapping into somebody's emotions to invoke action, and so like what in your childhood, where do you think the shy came from? Like, because I know, I mean, you mentioned the need to make some money and that kind of thing kind of made you confront it, but like, where did it come from? Because I just heard you just a second ago. You also said that when you're getting into photography, it was great because obviously you want to do buildings because don't want to be around a lot of people. I get that because I'm the same way, which is why I became self-employed.
Yeah,
because I get to pick and choose when and who and why and where I get to be around. But what kind of created the shy in the beginning? Like, where did that? Were you just naturally that way, or what brought in the?
Oh man, this is like therapy now. So I'll give you the light version.
Okay, that's fine.
I think there might be some natural inclination or what have you, but I had like a really. My father was. I had a father and two older brothers that were rough around the edges, shall we say.
Mm-hmm.
So I was the youngest in a very male dominant family. In fact, just male dominant down the line. I mean, I had two brothers. My father had three brothers. My father's father had all brothers. There's
wow.
There's this long lineage of men, all of which were very different than me. Maybe it is, maybe we're born this way, but they were very stereotypical, rough men, who believed you demonstrated your masculinity through strength and brute force. So I just had to cower. Like I just had to shy. I had to pull back, and men were not safe to me. So I hung up with my mom and hung up with their girlfriend. So it created a lot of shyness. And I think it's kind of it's both. I think there might be some natural inclination to who we are. That's what we see now in life as we get older is some of the most brilliant, introspective, wonderful people I've ever met have the good fortune to work with. They would have considered themselves the black sheep in their family growing up. They were maybe a little bit more of the outcast. I think what it does is that it allows you to be introspective. Being shy and pulling back allowed me to observe, and that observation, I think, is what actually made me a good photographer, because it's the art of observation, and it's the art of seeing what other people don't see.
Right.
So then spending 40 years seeing what other people don't see, seeing the world in pieces and pixels, if you will, and composing a whole, that's exactly how I coach. So now that I'm a coach, it's still right. So there's like this lineage, if you will, to natural instinct and ability, where, it was just, for me, a lot of my life came from just observation because of the shyness. I translated that into photography, which to me would have been a safe industry for a shy person, right? Especially back in the day, we worked in dark rooms, so you didn't have to see people.
Right.
But here's the irony of all of this, which I think has everything to do with your show. I now have authored 2 books. My 3rd book will be out in April. And I have shared this experience with many other authors. Many of us choose professions that we want to stay a little hidden. But the irony is, when you have something great to offer the world and you become well known for that, suddenly you're thrown on stages, like even the stage of life, that, because I've spoken to many authors that have said they became authors because they saw themselves as introverts. And then they wrote a best-selling book. And all of a sudden, now the spotlight is like, well, that didn't work out as planned.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And you have to figure out what to do with that, right? You retreat or you step up.
Yeah, there's so much similarity. It's like we're almost in reverse, because I started out as the, had nothing, did nothing. Look at me. I'm worthy. I can do things, and I'm going the other way. Like now, like when I'm on stage, I mean, I do tons of speaking engagements as well in my profession, and then I'm a musician, and on stage, I'm, on as you can get, but I'm not going in the crowd. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like I go out the back door, I get in my stupid little Sprinter truck, and I leave the premises. You know, I am very slowly turning into a hermit where I'm becoming shy.
Yeah.
Where never before would that. I mean, unless I'm around familiar people, then I'm just the same old me. But I mean, that's why I wanted to dig a little deeper on that, because I'm experiencing it in reverse. You know.
Yeah. I mean, I say all the time, for this reason, the lockdown was really good for me. I always said, if I can have the impact I want to have in the world and never leave the home and never have to actually put anything other than sweatshorts on, I'd be perfectly happy. Like that would be great. But the fact, again, as I said earlier, one of the first lessons I learned from selling eggs is that we'll do anything if the benefit is greater than the fear. And you know, at this point in my life, I'm very purpose driven. I'm very purpose driven by the people I can help, the people the businesses that I speak to that want to reach the affluent market. I got your back. Like, I know this better than anybody. Like I say, I forget data and research. Like, I spent 40 years in the closets of rich people. Like, I know how they think.
You did it.
So, you know, I want to help. I want to help businesses because here's why I want to help. It's not because I want to just help them make money, and it's not because I want to help them have better businesses, because I want them to have the same experience I did. When you work with the luxury market, I call it a call to greatness. Like, you might think that working with the luxury market is going to make you rich. You might think working with the luxury market is, going to be an honor because of those that you serve. But the thing is, the greatest benefit of working with the luxury market is they will pull out of you levels of greatness in yourself that you didn't even know existed.
Wow.
And that's why, because it's like playing tennis with a better player. Like, you're playing with these people that are sophisticated, ahead of you. Their minds think differently. They truly do. This is the biggest surprise to me, because we can tend to think of people with money or affluence as somewhat surface level or materialistic. But I'll tell you what, inherited or self-made wealth, when you have money, because you tend to be the target of cheesy salespeople, your radar is so heightened.
Makes sense.
The biggest surprise to me was I found affluent families highly perceptive. And what that requires of you then as a business serving that clientele, because they're so highly perceptive, they're reading your energy. That's what they're good at. They run on a vibe. Can I trust this person? Can I give this person the code to my front door? Do I trust this person? Or, a lot of my clients are Wall Street people. They're instinctively thinking about the market. Their perception, their energetic perception is so high. To serve them, you have to be what I refer to as clean energy. Like, you have to be in this business with the utmost of integrity. You cannot be in it because you're in it for the money, because they will smell that and they'll go a mile away. Yeah. They have to see something in you that they believe is exceptional.
Wow.
So, that's why, as I said, yes, I would rather just stay home, but I'm driven by making a difference, because what I just said, people don't know. And I want people to know that. I want them to know that so they can change their businesses. And I want them to know that so people stop judging other people. And in this case, don't judge affluent people for all the stereotypes you hear, because when you get in there, like I did for 40 years, it's a different world than you think. Yes, there are horrible rich people. There are horrible people in all avenues of life. It has most often has nothing to do with the money. It's the character of the person, or how the money affects that person's character. But it's their character. Money in and of itself is not evil. So, clearly, as you say, I'm deeply passionate about what I do and how I help self-employed business owners. So the benefits are greater than the fear. I'd love to hide out at home like you, Shane, but it's watching other people win is the bigger benefit for me.
Shane does not stay home. Trust me, he'd like to stay home, but he does not stay home.
Well, but I've adapted I used to. So and for me personally, I have basically the whole state of North Carolina is basically my market, and so I live on the coast, and Charlotte is my furthest market. It's 5-6 hours away.
Okay.
So but I ended up this year. Instead of going to the hotel and just not leaving the hotel room, I got my own hotel and I take it with me. I live in me and my dog live in my truck. I've got
That's
a
awesome.
Mercedes Sprinter, and
Yep.
we travel all over the state and out of the state, and we go to a little KOA campground. I don't have to deal with anybody, talk to anybody.
Yep.
I get it. And I'm happier than I don't know what I'm just happy.
He's doing
I think it's happier than a clam. Although I've never seen a clam smile. I don't know what the point of it. But to your point,
the whole point of helping those people is the drive, though. That
exactly.
is 100%.
Yep.
Always present, even though I might be uncomfortable.
Right. And you've learned practices to balance that, and that's the thing. Like, it's about learning how to take care of yourself. Like, I'm the same way. Like, when I'm 100%, I always say there's no gray with me. I'm 100% on or 100% off. Right? So I know how to take care of myself, to manage how to go. Like, I try really hard to not travel more than 4 days in a row, twice a month. Because for one, my dog is traumatized every time I go away. Yeah. So I don't like to leave him very long. Yeah. He's 14 years old. I gotta treasure every moment. Right. So so I come home and I live in North Florida. I live at just a charming historic town. I walk. I have lots of wellness practices. So you got to balance it, right? You have to refuel. Yeah. I look at it as refilling the reservoir. So I refill the reservoir, and then I go back out there again and drain it out, go back and refill.
Right. I wanted to ask you about just basically cold calling. I mean, that's what you did. That's like how you got into the high-end photography business, right? I mean, you walked into like the top of, what was it, like the most exclusive country club or something like that, right? And you just walked in, and I mean, that takes a lot of digging. That you got to dig down deep to say, I'm going to do it. A lot of people say, I mean, we work a lot with veterinarians, and dog trainers get into the business, or a lot of animal people get into the business because they don't like people. They're not good with people. They want to work with animals.
Makes sense.
The thing is you're not an animal person. You're a person. This is probably one of the most people-centric jobs. You have to teach the person how to handle the dog.
Really good point.
And so when I interview people, and I have over 30 locations, so we have trainers all over the country, and people come to me, they want to be a dog trainer. Why do you want to be a dog trainer? Well, I don't really like people. And I say, this is not going to be the business for you.
Yep. Wow.
I would say a lot of my dog trainers still don't like people that much, but they dig down and they learn how to do it. They learn how to get along with different people. We have high-end clients. We have not so high-end clients, put it that way. And they have to teach the same people the same information, and they have to get it the same way. But how you teach that person has to be different than, just like you said, you address each person in a way that they're gonna get the information, right, that you need them to get. But I tell them, but the fear of rejection when you're making the cold call, when you walk into a veterinarian's office, they're busy and everything else, and you want them to refer you, to trust you and everything, they cannot do it. You're starting with a no. That's what I tell people. It can't get any worse than this. They're already not referring you. They don't know who you are.
But, all right. So here's let me offer you this idea. And this is exactly what it is. So I don't like when you first said cold calling, I don't really consider anything I did starting out as cold calling. And that's I think an important distinction. And again, as I said earlier, these people are highly perceptive, whether you are calling upon, your ideal clients, or in my case, I was calling, my ideal clients were very wealthy, but I wasn't going directly to them because I didn't know who they were. I needed the introductions, but I would go to businesses that would serve them, but I would go with a different idea. I didn't walk in with, can you refer me type of attitude or energy. I had and I highly recommend this, and I think it's a super overrated, is just simply embody the energy that you just want as many people in the world to know that you exist. So I would walk into stores and introduce like what I do at that country club. I walked in a story, and I'll tell the story. It truly is one of the most exclusive country clubs in the United States. It's in Westchester County. Well, it's Westchester Country Club in Westchester, New York. And again, I also have to realize you also can see a series of lucky breaks, whatever that might look like. But I don't even remember what I was driving at that stage in my life, but I assure you it was a pretty junky car. So I was just starting out. But for some reason, the guard gate let me through. Either my car looked like somebody else's, or I just looked like staff. Like I probably looked like the house cleaner. So, because they're supposed to be stopping people, but the person at the gate let me through. So I found my way to the country club, and I go into the country club, and I went up to the receptionist and said, I wonder if I could have a moment with the manager. And again, she didn't say no, and I'm not sure why. Her whole job, I would think, was to kind of shield the manager. But maybe because if you're in there, you must belong there. So she went and got the manager. The manager came out, and I had some photographs with me, which I'll tell you about in a moment, another strategy. But I had some photographs with me, large photographs. And I said to him right at the bat, I introduced who I was, and I said, look, I just want to let you know that I exist. I'm not here to ask for anything. And he was a little fed up. I was taking his time. But I basically just showed him a few of my photographs and said, again, I'm not asking anything of you. I just want you to know I exist. 2 days later, that club manager called me, and he said to me, he goes, young man, I don't know what you're up to, but keep doing it. He said, in 15 years of managing this club, no one has ever asked me for a family photographer. One of our members just left my office asking if I knew a family portrait photographer because they're having a reunion at the club.
Yeah.
Right. Now, here's the thing. I guarantee you he's been asked that probably many times over his 15 years, but nobody came to mind.
Right.
I came to mind.
Right.
So he thinks it's the first time he's ever been asked. It's not. It's because all the other times he just blew it off. So This is one of the core. So what I used to do is I used to have my photographs because I specialized in very large photographs. So I had these really large photographs. I had them printed, and then I had them mounted on canvas because the canvas would enable me to roll them up. So I'd roll up these portraits on canvas, and I'd put them in a black architectural tube, like the tube that you would carry blueprints in.
Yeah.
And I would carry that thing with me everywhere. I would go around stores. I would intentionally wander into like really high-end children's clothing boutiques to act like I'm shopping for a gift. And inevitably, somebody was going to ask me what's in the tube because it's such a weird thing to carry.
That's true.
And before they even get their words out of the mouth, I'm unscrewing the top of it and rolling out my portraits. And one of my favorite story of doing that is there was a woman in Greenwich, Connecticut that owned a really, really super upscale children's clothing boutique. So I wandered in there and did my thing. I had a conversation with her, and she happened to mention that her husband was designing clothes, and so she gave him a little corner of the store to sell some sweaters. So she told me I could take a free sweater if I wanted because she liked me. Her name was Susie Hilfiger, and nobody knew who her husband was.
Wow.
Right? So,
Thomas.
So, Tommy Hilfiger, yeah. Literally, like he hadn't even launched yet, and she had the children's boutique. Well, she became, as you imagine, over the years, incredibly influential in my career and introducing me to all the people I needed to know in New York City and Greenwich, Connecticut. And there you go. And it all started from wandering in, carrying a tube of photographs and not asking for anything. I simply said, I just want you to know I exist.
Yeah.
So remove the feeling that you're cold calling, remove the idea that you need to get something from anybody. Just spread the number of people that know you exist in the world, and serendipity will happen. Weird things will happen. They just do.
We do that. I mean, I tell my trainers, well, first of all, you're walking into a veterinarian. Of course, you want something from them. You want them to refer you. But I tell them, don't walk in with the mindset of, will you give me something? I tell them, walk in and tell them, this is what I'm giving you. This is what I have to offer for you. This is how I can improve your business. That's how Shane does it. Shane is the master at veterinarian marketing. That's what we do. We can keep a dog in the home that is at risk of being surrendered. And if that dog stays in the home, they remain your client, an easy to handle client for another 10 years. Right. Yeah. And that's kind of the thing. But also, they're busy, just like the person at the country club is busy. And we do the same thing. Look, we're out here. We're already working with some of your clients. I just thought I'd let you know who I am. And we take the same approach. So I appreciate that.
Yeah. And if you have an opportunity to actually create a relationship with them, here's how I did it with the clothing stores. And this is completely doable with veterinary shops, groomers, pet supply stores. So what I would do is that when it got to the point they were interested in collaborating in some way, I would, for every client I received from the store, I went back to the store and bought a $500 gift certificate for the client. Okay, now you do the dollar amount proportionate to what makes sense for both your services and also the store. But my people are spending thousands of dollars, so $500 was a worthwhile gift. But what you're doing is you're creating a positive loop, right? So because the 500, because I guarantee you the store owner doesn't want a referral fee. The little $200 or $500. I mean, I had a shop, a clothing shop, a children's boutique on Madison Avenue in New York City. I don't even want to guess what the rent was. So if I gave her $500 a client, it wouldn't even matter. And she cares about her clients. She doesn't care about herself. People refer you because they care about the people they're referring you to. So for her, I'm creating a positive loop by spending the money. So they're getting the $500. They're not out a cent. But they're not just getting that in a referral fee. Instead, they're getting the customer to come back.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right. So it's easily a dog trainer can do this with a pet supply groomer. Like, give a gift certificate back to that service, because that actually means more to the referrer than any dollar amount.
I agree. We do it, believe it or not. But now everybody else knows we do it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Think of something else.
Yeah. So how do you what is your speaking? Well, I'm like, first of all, I'm blown away that you have 960 podcast episodes. The last one dropped yesterday. I listened to part of it this morning, driving my daughter to school, which is amazing.
Thanks for letting me know. I wasn't sure if I knew we were getting close to 1,000. So thank you.
Yeah, it even ours. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work to do. So I'm super impressed by that. But also the speaking. First of all, do you still have a hard time getting in front of people, or is it just like you're so used to it, you just do it?
No, I'll never get that used to it. I mean, I'm always nervous before a speaking gig. But, sort of as Shane was saying before, I think in most shy people or introverts, first of all, I think by and large, a huge percentage of professional speakers will identify as introvert. It's very common. And I think there's a couple of reasons for that. One is introverts or shy people are really good at being uncomfortable in the first place. We've been doing it our whole lives. I'm well trained at being uncomfortable and managing it well.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Right. And I think for a lot of introverts, whether we admit it to ourselves or not, we do crave the spotlight a little bit. Like we so rarely get attention. And in my personal life, and I've had a couple of relationships in my life that are super outgoing, much more so than I am. And we'll walk into a restaurant and, everybody will cheer their name, but not mine, because they don't even know who I am. Like in the dynamic of the relationship, I'm always the one that, can we have the corner table, please? And I always seem to be with people that no, let's take the center table right in the middle. So, I don't like the spotlight, except I want the spotlight when it will help me do what I need to do, when it helps me have the impact I want to make. Right. And that's the case.
I love it.
Yeah. So I don't love the spotlight, but I'll take it on because of it. Here's a phrase I say to myself a lot. And I actually say this to my clients a lot. My clients who suffer with imposter syndrome or worry about that, so they're somehow going to change if they become well-known or wealthy. And I said, look, recognition is a strategy, not a destination. My final game is not to be a recognizable person. My final game is my ego does not need the recognition, but it is absolutely a strategy to get the work that I want to do and to have the impact I want to make. So I do what I need to do to gain recognition. Tons of social media, podcast interviews, writing books, LinkedIn stuff. Like, I do what I need to do to gain the recognition that gives me the power and the opportunities to create the impact I want to make. So recognition is a strategy to me. It's not something I love, but I get the game, and I'm willing to do it.
Think about that, because I'm much the same way. Like I said, I man, put me on stage and in front of a crowd of people to speak, to play music. Man, it is like, I can't even explain how deep that hits home. Like, it really, like, it scratches my itch.
Yeah.
You know, but I don't want to go hang out with those people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's like, I used to be, I would get off stage and I'd be the guy in the crowd. I've got a show tonight that I'm already stressing about, because I'm going to have to tell these people, like, as soon as I wrap up my rig, I'm out of here, man. I am not staying to see what happens after. I'm not going to the bar. I'm not going to be in the crowd. I'm going out the back door, and I'm going to hell home. But
I think part of the reason for that,
but in the moment, it's the best thing that's ever happened.
Exactly. I think part of the reason that, though, is that because of your shyness, introversion, like those softer skills, we tend to be more empathetic, meaning, I don't want to say more empathetic in that we're better people or kinder people, but our ability to absorb other people's energy tends to be greater, which is good and bad. It also is what can be very draining. It can be very draining to absorb people's energy, but we feel the energy off the audience, I think, greater than most. So that's why it's like, I get it. It takes me a few minutes. Like, I'm not a speaker that comes out on the stage in a big splash, but I can almost calculate 7 minutes into my keynotes. Like, I feel the presence of the audience. And then that's it's that love exchange. It's like, oh man, I am so here and ready to go. But it does take me a little time to warm up. I'm aware of that. I do continue to try to train myself to, like, come out stronger and more comfortable. But I'm also okay with the fact that that's who I am. It takes me about 7 minutes to settle in to feeling the energy of the audience. But once I feel them, I'm there for them, not me, and that's when it gets really good.
Yeah, that makes sense.
When you're doing a live speaking engagement, and I try personally. I mean, now my speaking engagements are going to be somewhere around 100 people ish or less. But I try my best to make eye contact with every single person while I'm up there, but I'm also watching for when they start to glaze. You know what I mean? And I'll say some ridiculous off the cuff something, and everybody goes, "Oh," and like, I got them all back. But the ones that they're starting to kind of bob, and I mean, do you have any strategies for that you use? Any little like secret moves you have for regaining the attention of that person?
I find, for one, when I craft my keynotes, I tend to craft a keynote sort of in sections, right? I tend to look at it and say, usually there's like 7, I call them 7 fundamental shifts. Like, there's 7 highlights to a keynote for me. And I typically work with 7, because even if everybody in the audience walks away with 1, it's been a win for them. Right. So between 7, there's bound to be something there for everybody. So what I do is I have these 7 chapters, if you will, written on a Post-it note, and I put them on the wall in the cadence of where I want peak moments. So I actually visually, before I write the keynote, I visually create a cadence, peak moments, valleys, when I'm going to bring the emotions up, when I'm going to bring the emotions down. So it's pretty well planned in that regard, as far as what will be the high moments and low moments. I continue to try to work a little more planned humor into my talks. I think it's an area I could get a little better at, and I will likely hire some experts in that field to sit in an audience and, like, okay, make a joke out of that. Or you could, but here's what I find. Once I get comfortable, the impromptu humor just kind of comes to me. It turns out, and I do know this, I mean, in the right environment, it actually can be quite funny. And my humor not overtly self-deprecating, but I always on stage, I'm always wearing like unbelievable sneakers. Like I have a obsession with really cool sneakers and expensive sneakers. They stand
Right.
out for sure. So my sneakers always end up on Instagram far more than I do. Like everybody's
Really?
taking
Wow.
pictures. Yeah. So there's always a joke to be made of my sneakers at some point. Like I have a pair that is they're gorgeous. They're like rainbow colored, but almost like tie-dyed.
Mm.
So, at some point it's, I'm likely to mention that, not that anybody's surprised that I'm gay. Like, look at my sneakers, right? It's right. So at some point, I said, so there's some self-deprecation, but it's also just being really honest and authentic. Like I'll say something like, I know I'm not kidding anybody. Like I know how I show up. So
man, that's so funny. There's so many crossover because I'm a beach bum. I live at the coast. Like 50 yards this way is the ocean.
That's
and
awesome.
But I go out in all these speaking engagements in front of all these important people in flip flops. I don't have a shirt on, button up shirt, pants, whole 9 yards. But I'm bringing some of me with me. You know what I mean? And I always, it's so funny that you brought that up because I always draw attention to it. I go, I live on the coast and I'm a beach bum, hence my outfit,
Yep.
And everybody's like, oh, ha, 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 like, because they're looking at me like, this fool just showed up to a formal speaking engagement in flip flops. And I'm
That's funny.
You damn right I did. It's just wild. It's so so
it's as I said, I just find
interchangeable.
I think I could work on planned humor. Like I said, I work hard on the cadence. I could probably work a little bit more on intended humor. But at the end of the day, when you settle in with the audience, like I'm fully capable of being pretty funny. Like I'll pull some things out of my head.
Come back, Jeffrey.
Did you lose me?
Yeah, come on.
Am I back?
There we go.
Yes,
you're
I
back.
can hear you. I can't see you. Oh, there you are. Gotcha.
As you know, we had the hurricane last night, so some technology
Yeah.
is still
A
little funky. I'm glad I was able to be here at all. We at least have power.
Yeah, I'm glad too. Yeah. So how did you? I mean, okay. So then you're doing you're building your portrait business and everything, and now here you are. You've written a couple of books. You've got the podcast. You're doing your speaking. How I'm just like, how do you get from there to here? How do you I mean, did you go to business school or did you just learn it or you picked it up?
Learned it.
You picked it up. You learned it. You learned by doing, right? You learned it by doing it, right?
Yeah. Thankfully, I seem to have had just naturally a good business head. But I think what it was really curiosity. You can call it a business head, but honestly, I was just insanely curious. So I always observed people, especially when you're not actively participating in life. You're just kind of sitting back and observing life. And that has everything to do with business. If I could point to one characteristic that I think made the difference for me in business over 40 years was I tended to be sensitive to the way the world was changing and the way society was changing or the way the lives of my clients were changing. I tend to feel it a little bit before the change. Okay. So I was always able to kind of stay a little bit ahead of the game. And to me, the core principle was make people's lives easier and they'll stay with you forever. So I was always, in order to make people's lives easier, you have to look at what challenges are coming up for them, right? So, one example in the photography business, I had a beautiful gallery and the town in which I had my business in, beautiful, nice, large gallery of my work, beautifully appointed and decorated. So typically, people, my photography is on location, but the gallery, people could stop in and enjoy the portraits, but it's also where my clients came in to see their photographs, the proofs. And it was anything from, paper proofs back in the day to projecting them on the wall, but they were surrounded with beautiful portraits. But it became really obvious to me, especially during, after 9/11, again, I was based in the New York City area, but then also during the recession, the big shift in the lives of my clients was it was obvious that many people working on Wall Street, there were so many layoffs that those that had a job were working the jobs of 3, 4, and 5 people. So time became an issue. So at the same time, I had a conflict. I was working with people who put their family first. That's why they would hire a family photographer. So I'm working with a clientele whose priority is their family. They're incredibly busy. any idea that I'm going to drag them out in the evening to come see their proofs is unrealistic and seems actually quite honestly kind of unkind. I actually wanted these parents to be home with their kids, not spending the evening with me. So I created this system long before Zoom even existed. I created a system where I could show my photographs digitally, remotely to my clients. So my clients stayed in their homes. But that also, what ended up happening from that idea, and I was doing this in the early 2000s, like before the technology easily adapted to it, I figured out how to pull it off. But that also enabled me to work with people internationally. Once I made that system really work well, I introduced, like we were saying earlier, I went around to all the finest hotels in New York City and introduced myself to the concierges and said, I just want you to know I exist. Well, one of the things that people go to the concierge for is to say, gosh, we're visiting New York City from Italy and we'd love to get a family portrait in Central Park. The concierge is like, I know the guy.
Wow. I got a guy.
Okay. Yeah. So I got a guy.
That's
and
awesome.
Now I was able to do those sessions. The families were able to go back to Italy, and I would be able to, at a later date when they return home, meet with them online and show them the proofs, have them place their order, ship their portraits. So I tended to stay ahead of what I saw as upcoming challenges for my clients. And that's what we always need to do. I don't know. I've obviously said this. I'm not sure why every large company doesn't have a COO. And I don't mean a chief operating officer. I mean a chief observation officer. If there was somebody that was in charge, somebody highly empathetic who had the job to observe how are people's lives changing and how does that business need to adapt? Because after every crisis, 9/11, the recession, the pandemic, after every crisis, there was a major shift in what society values, what makes them tick, how they work, how they operate. And companies that struggle is because they can't see the change. They can't meet people where they are any longer.
Right.
So to me, one of the greatest, there's that phrase in business made famous by Michael Gerber, to work on your business more than in it. Great advice for making sure you don't get overly caught up in mundane tasks. I think a better phrase is to say work outside of your business more than on it. The more you can get outside of your business and imagine, what do people see? What do they need to see, hear, and feel in order to hire you? The more you can speak their lingo.
Wow. I feel like we're getting some free coaching here, Shane, which I appreciate.
I can't help myself.
No, I love it. Did you have a mentor when you were coming up and when you got this business up and running, or is it just like you pick it up from where you pick it up?
It's a great question because it's kind of a combination. I mean, I didn't have a photographer mentor. Until very much later years. There was a photographer who I visited a couple times who I really admired his work, but I don't know if I'd call him so much a mentor. But there's this weird dynamic between, I think mentorship is helpful, but I've always found a lot of benefit in putting blinders on. And when I started my photography business, I do the same thing. I've been doing the same thing as a speaker for the last few years, and I'm ready to kind of get on the other side of it. But I do believe there's a time when you need to put the blinders on and pay no attention to what people in your industry are doing so that you do something different. You're easily subject to too much outside influence, and then you become standardized. You become the dog trainer like every other dog trainer, or the photographer like every other photographer. I put my blinders on, had no idea how other people ran their business. When I finally took my head out of the sand, which was about 15 years into my business, I kind of picked my head up and got involved in other photography associations. It was then that I realized what I had built. I'm like, I had no idea. I thought everybody had this level of success.
I definitely empathize with that. I mean, I had a mentor that just kind of said, "Hey, I didn't even know when I got into this, I didn't even know there was such a thing that existed. I had no idea that people paid people to train their dog."
Well, all right. Now, I did have a coach. I'm thinking, because a mentor and coach to me are two different things. Mentor tends to be somebody you admire or look up to, who probably is guiding you for free. I hired my first coach in 1999.
Okay.
Now, 1999, so that was a little before it was cool. You know, people didn't really know what the hell it was, but I found out about this thing called business coaching. And I remember life coaching becoming popular and thinking, what the hell is that? Like, why do you need a coach
Yeah.
about to life? It didn't make sense, but business coaching made sense to me. I'm like, okay, I could use, and here's the thing, and people don't just hire business coaches when they need help. I hired a business coach when I was at the peak years of my business. To the rest of the world, it seemed like I had everything. I had a thriving business that appeared to be at a peak. It was at a really good stage. I was married at the time, had 3 healthy kids, beautiful home in Connecticut. And that's when I hired a coach, because I don't want to say it felt lonely at the top, because I don't, whatever one's top is, but there is truth to that. Like, I got to a point where it felt really lonely. Like, I didn't feel I had a staff of 5. Even my wife at the time, it's like, you don't want to bring home all your work challenges to home, because you're trying to respect boundaries and raise kids. And so I hired a coach because I really wanted that partnership. I wanted that person that could help me make choices and decisions.
Okay.
And I worked with my first coach for 7 years, 3 times a month for 7 years, and until he retired, honestly. And then that's when he retired. I decided I wanted to do that for others, as I had received from him. So that's when I took my coach training. And I've always had a coach. I'm always hiring a coach somewhere along the way.
All right. And that was what I wanted to find out. Like, how did you make that transition from, okay, you're running a business, you're doing your day-to-day, like, you're in the hustle, and now you want to switch it up and teach other people, coach other people. How do you do it? What do you do?
Yeah.
What works, what doesn't work, that kind of thing.
Exactly.
Wow.
I was 25 years into my photography business at that point, where photography had been 100% of my income. And then, for the past 15 years, it was sort of a transition, less photography, building a coaching business. I actually just thought it was going to be kind of augmenting my overall business. But as it turned out, I love coaching people. I've built 2 educational programs, the books. So it's been kind of a 15-year segue. I actually officially retired from photography just last September. I did my last photo shoot and let it be known that I would not be taking on any more. So I'm really just a year out from, as I said, 2024 is the first year that in my life that I've not made money as a photographer.
That was my next question is, so that's interesting. Wow.
Yeah.
Shane, you had what?
Yeah, I love the kind of lonely at the top comment, because, it's accurate. Like, even with what I do, we're not, gonna set the earth on fire, or nothing. But in the group of people that I'm around, that I grew up with, friends, like, there's nobody in my world that is in a position of in their career where they can just go, hey man, let's go to Aruba today.
Yeah.
And just get on a plane and go, and not worry about it, and just be like, okay, this is just normal. I mean, so like that, and then that also feeds that introvert, like, reverse, because there isn't anybody to hang out with, and it's like the whole career was, man, if I could just get myself to a place where I just had enough money to do what I want, and I can, work when I want to, and blah, 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 blah. And then you go, well, shit, there's nobody here.
Yeah.
Hey man, I went to Aruba with you. Get out of here.
Yeah, well, I mean,
I'll
this
go.
guy, right. I'm sure plenty of them would go if I was buying that plane ticket, but
yeah.
But
I
those,
get it. Yeah, and for me, it was decisions. Like, I got really tired of being the only one making decisions. Like, I really wanted somebody to help just talk through decisions. In the end, it was going to be my decision, but just talk things through is why, But again, why do you hire a coach? I mean, I look at it as people always come to you for what they think they need, but almost always what they actually need is different than what they think they need. So people will come to me for business growth. That's what they think they want, or they want something with the business. But in the end, it's they as people are changed. And I certainly want all my clients to walk away knowing that they have a forever coach. Like, even when we're no longer professionally working together, I'm always here. because that's an important value for me.
That's interesting. And so this is a complete shift. I mean, you're still in business. This is your business. So you just took it's like a reinvention. You reinvented, right?
I'd say it evolved, it just kind of evolved. Even right down to the practicality of my domain. My domain has been jeffreyshaw.com from the beginning. I created this photography brand, intentionally lifting up my name as like a designer. So the domain was jeffreyshaw.com. And you can almost, if you were to look at the 24-year, however long the internet's been around, evolution of my domain, 24 years ago, when you went to jeffreyshaw.com, it was all photography. 16 years ago, it was all photography, but these coaching services were introduced. Now you go to my website, if you don't read the copy, you wouldn't know I was ever a photographer.
Right.
So it's literally like I've had the same domain name that just has evolved. So it's just sort of, but it's, again, never been done without intention. I mean, there was a strategy to it. But one thing I will say, that there was also that stage, which I meet a lot of people at this stage where, what you've been doing for so long is like your primary website. And then you want to do something else or an extension. And so many people come to me, they have 2 and 3 websites for like all the different things that they do. And I made the same mistake, and I do call it a mistake. I launched I had my photography website, then I launched a coaching website under a different name, had a cutesy little coaching name. And I realized at some point I felt like I was having an affair with myself. It was like I had these 2 websites. Like I didn't want my photography clients to know I was coaching, so I felt like they would think my attention was diluted, funny. Right? I was cheating. My coaching felt like I was supposed to act a certain way. But it didn't take long for me to say, this is nonsense. I'm one person. I feel like the world wants to know holistically who I am. And I think my photography clients should know that I've got a good business head. And I think being who they are, they would appreciate how strategic I was in building this photography business. It wasn't just talent alone. And my coaching clients benefit from knowing that I've spent all those years selling something that nobody needed to the hardest market in the world to get into. So there was validity, and I have something to say, and I know what to say about it. So to me, I just blended those 2 things together, and then that's why it's been kind of rolling and evolving to the point where we are today. It's like my photography story, my story as a photographer, explains everything. It explains how I got here. It explains how my brain works, but it's the story behind what I do today. It's the whole story behind what I do.
Do you feel, and I mean, I don't want to take all your time. We got to start to wind down. I have a couple personal questions, but I want to ask you, like, in your coaching and everything, like, okay, I feel like, I mean, that's why we named the podcast, if you read, we named the podcast from dog training. People call us. They're like, I got a great dog. He's awesome. He's loving. He's this, he's that. But he jumps, but he pulls, but he does whatever. So I used to tell people, yeah, I'm a butt fixer. That's like, what do you do for a living? I fix the butts, But also then it kind of boiled down to, I want to start my own business. I want to be a business coach. I want to do this. I want to do that. But what? But like, man, you're a photographer. Why would anybody hire you as a business coach or whatever? And I feel like, I mean, my advice for everybody is just you're on it now. I want to start a podcast. Shane and I are always like, let's do a podcast. Let's do a podcast. You know what, man? I always feel like just pull the trigger.
It took us 2 years, but we finally got
just pull the trigger and do it. And like, it's like learn, like kind of, it's almost like fake it till you make it to a degree. You know what I mean? I mean, do you feel, what, as a professional, how do you feel? Like, do you give that advice? Is that advice that do you say, just like, don't keep talking about it. You can plan it until you're planned out. Do you feel like it's just pull the trigger, just get out there and do it?
At some point, you just pull the trigger. I mean, I think a very core principle that I've always lived by is, and I don't know where I heard it or if it's a famous quote or what have you, but at some point in my life, I just really embodied this idea that just make a decision and then make it right. Like, I don't live in a land of bad decisions. I don't live in the land of failures. I don't live in the land of regrets. It's like, just make a decision. open the damn business and then make it right. And the make it right part is the fight. Like, just do everything you can to make it right. You'll never know, was it the right decision or wrong decision. Just make the decision and make it right. And I think that's fundamentally how I live my life. Like, I have people will, I've been on podcasts and I'll say, tell us a failure story. I'm like, I don't have one. They're like, well, everybody has a failure story. And I'm like, I don't define it as a failure. Like, I literally, I'm not trying to be dramatic. Like, I just didn't know what they're talking about. I'm like,
I agree with you.
I just made a decision and made it right. And right is whatever right is. Like, if it leads to something else because that wasn't the right thing to be doing, then it was the right thing to do.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I do use the word failure sometimes, but I always say failure is a hell of a good teacher. It's like, well, I did it, and I won't do it that way again. But the only way you learn sometimes is by
progression is a healthy teacher. Like, that's just a thing that you learn from. But it's just the progression. So to me, the progression of life is a whole process of just making it right. So, yes, just at some point, just jump in and remember that, no matter how scared any of us are to do anything, find in yourself why the benefit is greater than the fear, and you'll do it.
There it is. The benefit greater than the fear. That's the takeaway, right? Tell us about your dog real quick. I just want to hear. It's 14. You have a 14-year-old.
He'll be just about to be 14 in December 16th is his birthday. He's a schnoodle, a schnauzer poodle.
Yep.
Shortly after I got him, and he's 3 pounds. When I got, he was this tiny little dog. I was living in New York City at the time, and carry him everywhere. And a woman asked me, "What kind of dog is that?" And I said, "Well, he's a schnoodle. It's a schnauzer and a poodle." And you could see her brain thinking for a minute. And she said, "So your dog has the stubbornness of a schnauzer and the smarts of a poodle. So basically, your dog is a wise ass." And I'm like, bingo, that has been his personality for 14 years. Like, he is a loving wise ass. Like,
you're a wise ass.
I mean, he just smart as could be, and he knows exactly how to manipulate his way through life.
I love it. People ask us like, what's the hardest train? Like what's the smartest dog or the hardest dog to train or whatever? And I say the smarter they are, the harder they are to train, because those are the ones that know how to work every angle. They know.
No, he's and his name is Indy, because I foolishly thought when my oldest son, I divorced later, at some point, and my daughter's shares custody, but my son was with me 100% of the time. So when he went off to college, I was traumatized. So I decided to get a dog to replace the kid going off to college, and called him Indy, as in I was getting my independence, except as a friend said to me, "You didn't get your independence, you got a dog." Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, somehow that felt like freedom to me when you don't have kids at home, but no, the dogs are actually more work. But I laugh about it now. It's like, I named him Indy, but I should have named him Dentine, because he's like gum on my shoe. Like, he never leaves my side. He's at my feet. I had to lock him out of the office to do a podcast, because otherwise I'm too afraid he would just start barking.
Oh, really?
But it's funny. He's a character.
That's awesome.
He's truly a character.
And you moved from, you were in Miami Beach, but you moved up to North Florida, you said, huh? Whereabouts are you now?
I was in Miami Beach just for 2 years, and then over to Brickell, which is part of downtown Miami. I was there for 6 years. And then 2 years ago, moved up here to Jacksonville. I'm in the historic district of Jacksonville, which is actually called Avondale. And we have our own town. We have our own town center, and my house is 100 years old. And it's kind of why I moved. We were talking earlier about refilling the reservoir, balancing life. Miami just wasn't doing that for me, because as much as I loved Miami also is, I'm a New Yorker, and Miami is more in your face than New York City. Like, it's just, everything's bright, loud. The people are in your face. Like, everybody's just in your face. So after 8 years of that, I'm like, I need a little break from that. I want something quaint, and I'd consider going back up to Connecticut, but I like the beaches a lot. So I settled on as far north of Florida as I can go, Jacksonville, but I bought in the historic district.
Nice.
I've grown to love it. I wasn't sure when I landed here, but I've grown to love it.
Shane will be heading that way soon. You'll be out in Jacksonville soon. Yeah, for sure. So
let me know.
Well, hey, man, thank you so much. I mean, we could go on and on, of course. You know how these things
Probably.
are. But I really thank you for the time. I'm glad Isabella found you. I don't know if you know, she's my VA. She is all the way in Colombia, and she found you. She read your book out there and loved it. And I told her, man, I like you. I don't know, like 960 podcasts if you struggle to get guests, but we're still, trying to find them. And Isabella tracked you down, and I really appreciate you taking the time to
my pleasure.
to give us
really insightful, man. I learned a lot today, and I am walking away feeling inspired as well. So
good,
awesome.
Excellent,
awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna hit stop here, and thank you again, Jeffrey. And we'll put
make sure leave your computer open.
Oh yeah. Yep. That's our standard sign off. Don't sign off until it's uploaded. Yeah,
exactly.
And,
I get it. Yeah.
And I think this will come out in about a week, and I'll shoot you the link and all that stuff. So
excellent.
Yeah, awesome. Excellent. Well, thank you again, and good luck with everything, and good luck with Indy. And
I appreciate it.
Yeah, and
go scramble some eggs for old time's sake.
Exactly.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. All right. I literally lived a life. Well, which came first, the chicken or the egg? I'm like, I don't know. I just sold eggs.
Yeah. Exactly. That's funny. Well, thank you again. Take care.
All right. Thank you.
All
so
right.
I should leave my. See, we're at 98% uploading. So I should just hold until we're at 100.
Wait till it's 100.
So here we go.
Thank you for listening to this edition of the Butt Fixer Podcast. Stay tuned for more guests, more stories, and more butt fixes. Make sure you click like, subscribe, and follow at all of the places where you stream podcasts.